The coffee in the chipped ceramic mug was black, thick, and hot enough to scald the tongue. That was the only way Ronin drank it. It was a crude stimulant, unfiltered and bitter, brewed from beans that had likely expired before the current Federation administration took office. To Ronin, it was fuel. To the officer standing across the metal table, it was a biological hazard, a symbol of everything wrong with humanity. Ronin sat at the corner table of the Outpost 4 mess hall, his back pressed against the cold Durasteel wall, his eyes fixed on the reflection in the darkened viewport. He was a landscape of a man, weathered and eroded like a cliff face exposed to too many harsh winters and too little sunlight. His hair was the color of iron filings, cropped close to a scalp that was mapped with the white, jagged lines of old shrapnel scars, souvenirs from wars that weren't in the history books anymore. His hands wrapped protectively around the mug were broad and scarred, the knuckles swollen and discolored from a lifetime of hitting things that didn't want to break. Across from him, Commander Elara did not sit. She hovered. She was a Centurian, a species that prided itself on elegance, intellect, and the absolute unquestioned superiority of their technology. She was hauntingly beautiful, but in a cold, sterile way that made looking at her feel like staring into a surgical laser. Her skin was the color of pale glacial ice, smooth and poreless, shimmering slightly under the harsh fluorescent lights of the mess hall. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of pure white, falling over the shoulders of a uniform that wasn't stitched, but grown. A shimmering silver-white weave of smart fabric that adjusted to her body temperature and glowed with faint, rhythmic bioluminescence. She looked at Ronin not with hatred, but with the detached scientific curiosity one might reserve for a particularly stubborn bacteria sample that refused to be eradicated by antibiotics. "I am reviewing the efficiency diagnostics for the third time, Ronin," Elara said. Her voice was melodic but devoid of warmth, like wind chiming through frozen icicles. "Your sector is operating at 99.4% efficiency. By Federation standards, this is acceptable. By Centurian standards, it is a failure. The standard is 100%. Why do you insist on manual calibration for the atmospheric stabilizers? We have algorithms that can adjust the mixture in nanoseconds. We have drones that can do your job without consuming resources." Ronin took a slow, deliberate sip of the coffee. He let the bitterness sit on his tongue, grounding him in the moment. He didn't look at her holographic data pad which hovered in the air between them, displaying cascading waterfalls of red data. He looked past her, out the reinforced window where the red dust storms of the planet were battering against the perimeter shields with the force of a sandblaster. "Algorithms don't feel the vibration in the floor deck when a bearing is about to seize," Ronin said. His voice was a low rumble, a sound like gravel tumbling inside a cement mixer. "Machines read numbers. A man reads the machine." Elara's violet eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing her perfect features. "That is the primitive thinking that keeps your species tethered to the dirt while mine sails the stars. You are a relic, Ronin. Look at you. You consume toxic stimulants. You repair fusion drives with iron wrenches. You spend your solar cycles staring at the sand waiting for... What? Rust?" She leaned forward, her silver uniform shimmering as it reacted to her rising stress levels. "Do you not feel the weight of your own obsolescence? The High Command stationed me here to oversee the terraforming project, not to babysit a human who refuses to evolve. You have been here 12 years. 12 years of silence. 12 years of grease and dust. Doesn't the nothingness decay your mind?" Ronin set the mug down. He aligned the handle perfectly parallel to the edge of the table. A tiny ritual of order in a chaotic universe. "Quiet is a gift, Commander. Boredom is a luxury. You haven't seen enough of the universe to know the difference between peace and waiting." "I have seen the core worlds," Elara countered, her tone dripping with the arrogance of the highborn. "I have graduated from the war colleges of Prime with honors. I know strategy, I know conquest. I understand the mathematics of victory. And I know that sitting here servicing old machines in a sector no one cares about is a waste of sentient life. I have requested a transfer back to the core fleet this morning. I belong where the future is being written, not in a museum." Ronin looked at her then. His eyes were gray and flat, devoid of the sparkle of youth but heavy with a weight Elara couldn't comprehend. They were the eyes of a man who had seen the future written, and usually it was written in blood. "Be careful what you ask for, Commander," he said softly. "The future has a way of arriving before you're ready for it." He turned back to the window. The dust storm was picking up, swirling in violent eddies of crimson and ochre, but Ronin wasn't watching the sand. He was watching the indigenous scavengers, leather-winged reptiles that nested high in the canyon walls. They were creatures of habit, lazy and territorial. But today they were scattering. They were screeching, diving into the heart of the storm to escape their nests. Animals always knew before the sensors did. They felt the pressure change in their hollow bones. Then the coffee in his mug rippled. It started as a faint tremor, concentric rings spreading from the center of the black liquid. It wasn't the rhythmic, mechanical thrum of the fusion generator. It was something deeper, something heavy hitting the atmosphere hard enough to bruise the sky. Ronin's hand stopped moving. The slump of the bored maintenance man vanished instantly. The muscles in his neck corded. His breathing shifted, becoming slow and rhythmic. "Did you feel that?" Elara asked, tapping the side of her temple where her neural interface implant sat. "My internal sensors are registering a microtremor." "Is your primitive generator malfunctioning again?" "I told you the magnetic seals were degrading." Ronin stood up. He didn't rush. He moved with a terrifying economy of motion, pushing the chair back without making a sound. "Not the generator," he said. "Atmospheric displacement, heavy tonnage. Kinetic entry." "Impossible," Elara said, her eyes glazing over with a milky white sheen as she accessed the station's long-range scanners via her neural link. "The orbital grid is clear. My interface shows nothing but standard weather patterns. There are no ships on the scope." "Your interface is being jammed," Ronin said, his voice tightening. "Look out the window, Commander. Use your eyes, not your chip." Elara turned, annoyance plain on her face. She looked out the viewport, and then her pale blue face went slack. The clouds above were breaking, torn apart by blunt force. Shadows were descending through the red haze. They were not the sleek, elegant, teardrop-shaped ships of the Centurian fleet. They were massive, ugly blocks of scarred black iron. They bristled with kinetic cannons and exhaust ports that belched thick, oily smoke. They looked like flying factories built for the sole purpose of murder. They didn't glide. They fell with controlled malice, their retro thrusters firing dirty orange flames that scorched the sky. "That is not a trade fleet," Ronin said, stepping away from the table. "Vorg," Elara whispered, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "The Vorg Hegemony? That is illogical. They were eradicated in the fringe campaigns 20 years ago. Our superior technology wiped them out. We burned their worlds." "Technology doesn't kill ideology," Ronin said, checking the pockets of his coveralls. "And you didn't burn them all." "They weren't wiped out, they were waiting, rebuilding, remembering." The station's red alert klaxon finally kicked in, a harsh, grinding scream that tore through the mess hall. It was an old-school siren, raw and analog, designed to wake the dead. Elara flinched, her hands going to her ears. We must evacuate," Elara stammered, her composure cracking like a dropped mirror. "The escape pod's in the south quadrant. My protocol dictates immediate withdrawal of high-value personnel." "Pods are gone," Ronin said flatly. He was already moving toward the door, his stride long and purposeful. "First thing a Vorg assault group targets is the escape capability. They don't want a chase, they want a cage match. Then we lock down the command spire. We activate the energy shields." Elara was chasing him now, her graceful glide replaced by a frantic, undignified run. "My distress beacon will reach the fleet. The Admiral will send a task force. Signal is jammed. You can't hear it because your interface filters out static, but the airwaves are screaming. And the command spire is a glass coffin. It's the first thing they'll target to blind us." Ronin didn't look back. "If you want to live to see that transfer, Commander, you stop thinking like a computer and start thinking like prey. Follow me." He didn't lead her to the high-tech secure zones. He didn't lead her to the command center. He led her into the dark. They descended into the bowels of the station, down narrow stairwells that smelled of grease, hot metal, and human sweat. The emergency lighting cast long, flickering shadows against the bulkheads. The air grew hotter, thicker, heavy with the scent of ozone. This was Ronin's world, the maintenance sublevels, the guts of the machine. Elara was breathing hard, her pristine silver uniform smudged with grease from the handrails. "Where are we going?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. "This is the waste disposal sector. This is filth. There is no strategic value here." Ronin stopped in front of a heavy blast door marked Hazardous Storage, Biohazard Level 4. It was covered in grime and peeling warning stickers. He punched a code into the keypad. It wasn't a digital Centurian code that required a retinal scan. It was a mechanical sequence. Heavy buttons clicking audibly under his calloused fingers. Click, 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 thunk. The door didn't slide on silent magnetic rails. It groaned, heavy steel hinges grinding against years of disuse and rust. It swung open with a sound like a dying beast. Inside, the air was cool and dry, conditioned by a separate system. The walls were lined with metal racks, and on the racks sat violence in its purest form. There were rifles, not the sleek white energy pulse carbines Elara was used to, which hummed with clean power. These were heavy, solid projectile weapons with wooden stocks made of real walnut and blued steel barrels that smelled of gun oil. Kinetic drivers, weapons that threw a slug of lead and tungsten fast enough to punch through a bulkhead. There were bandoliers of high-explosive grenades, dull green and heavy. There were combat knives the size of a forearm, serrated and wicked, sharpened to a molecular edge. And there was armor, matte black, scuffed, heavy plating made of Kevlar and ceramic. Primitive, ugly, effective. Elara stopped in the doorway, her violet eyes wide with a mixture of disgust and confusion. "Ronin, what is this?" "These are slug throwers, kinetic weapons. These belong in a museum of barbarism. They are unauthorized. Possession of non-regulated ballistic weaponry is a Class A felony under Federation law." Ronin walked into the room. He ran his hand along the stock of a heavy assault rifle. It was a gesture of respect, almost affection. "It's insurance," he said. "Your people believe in energy shields, diplomacy, and clean wars. I believe in physics." He pulled the rifle from the rack. He worked the action, clack, clack. The sound was mechanical, brutal, and reassuringly loud. It was the sound of a machine that could not be hacked, jammed, or turned off. He tossed a heavy black vest at Elara. It hit her in the chest, heavy and coarse against her delicate, grown fabric uniform. "Put it on," he ordered. "I will not wear this," Elara hissed, holding the vest like it was a dead rat. "It is heavy, it is crude. It restricts movement. My personal energy field will protect me. It is generated by a localized singularity. Your energy field is tuned to stop plasma and laser fire," Ronin said, strapping ammunition pouches to his belt. "The Vorg use kinetic railguns, solid metal rounds moving at Mach 4. Your shield won't even slow them down. It will overload before the round even touches your skin. That vest? That vest is ceramic plate and weave. It might keep your internal organs on the inside where they belong." Elara looked at the vest, then at Ronin. For the first time, she saw past the maintenance uniform. She saw the scars on his arms, the way his muscles moved under the fabric. She saw the way he checked the weapon, not with panic, but with a cold, professional familiarity. He wasn't fumbling, he was preparing. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Maintenance drones do not have personal armories. Humans are builders, laborers. They are not warriors like the Centurions." Ronin picked up a combat knife and slid it into the sheath at his hip. "Before I came here to watch the dust settle, I had a different job. I solved problems. The Vorg were a big problem." A voice boomed over the station's PA system. It wasn't human and it wasn't Centurion. It was a synthesized growl, deep and vibrating with malice, a sound that bypassed the ears and rattled the ribcage. "Attention, Station 4. We scan the human biometrics. We know he is here. We seek the ghost, the silencer. Deliver him to the hangar bay and your deaths will be quick. Resist and we will flay this station down to the rivets. We will burn the air you breathe." Elara froze. Her neural interface flashed red warnings across her vision. She grabbed Ronin's arm. "The silencer? The war criminal? The human legend who burned the Vorg shipyards at the Antares Nebula single-handedly? That is a myth used to frighten cadets." Ronin picked up a shotgun, a trench sweeper with a drum magazine loaded with depleted uranium buckshot, and slung it over his back. "They call it a war crime. I called it finishing the job." He looked at Elara, his gray eyes locking onto her violet ones. "They aren't here for the station, Commander. They aren't here for your terraforming data. They're here for me. Then logically we should surrender you," Elara said, her voice shaking as she tried to cling to the cold comfort of Centurion logic. "If we give them the target, the probability of them leaving the non-combatants increases by 40%. Ronin laughed. It was a dry, humorless bark. "You really don't know the Vorg, do you? They don't take prisoners, they don't make deals. They're here to erase this place because it insulted them by existing. The only reason you're still breathing is because they want the sport of hunting me first." He handed Elara a sidearm. It was a massive revolver, a piece of steel that looked like a cannon. It fired 44 Magnum rounds, chemical propellants, old school. Safety is, well, there is no safety, Ronin said. Don't fire until you see the heat signature in their eyes. Aim for the joints, knees, neck, under the arms. Center mass shots just bounce off their shock plate. Elara held the primitive weapon with 2 hands. It felt impossibly heavy, cold and dead compared to her living smart weapons. I cannot operate this, it has no targeting computer. It has no autocorrect, it does not link to my neural mesh. Ronin grabbed her shoulder. His grip was warm and rough against her cold synthetic skin. Computer is off, Commander, you wanted to lead? You wanted to be where the history is written? Here it is. Welcome to the mud. He racked the charging handle of his rifle. Let's go say hello. They moved through the maintenance tunnels, bypassing the main corridors where the sounds of screaming and tearing metal had already started. Ronin moved with a silence that defied his bulk. He knew every bolt, every vent, every squeaky floor plate of the station. He navigated the darkness like a predator in its own den, checking corners, listening to the vibrations in the walls. Elara struggled to keep up. The armor was heavy, crushing her elegant posture. The heat in the tunnels was rising as the station's cooling systems failed. Her pristine white hair was matted with sweat and grease. She felt heavy, clumsy, and terrifyingly mortal. "Where are we going?" she whispered, the sound harsh in the silence. "Hangar Bay 1, Ronin replied. They'll land the command ship there. That's where Warlord Crag will be. Cut off the head, the body dies. It's the only way we stop the slaughter." "We are attacking them," Elara gasped. "There are 2 of us. My sensors detect thermal signatures of at least 50 hostiles. That is suicide. Numbers don't matter in a fatal funnel," Ronin said. "They're arrogant, they think I'm old. They think I'm hiding. They think you're helpless. We're going to prove them wrong." They reached a ventilation grate overlooking the main hangar. The scene below was a slaughterhouse. The blast doors had been blown inward. Through the smoke and sparks, Vorg troopers were pouring in. They were monsters, 7 feet tall, encased in pressurized combat suits that hissed with hydraulics. They carried railguns that tore through the station's bulkheads like paper. Elara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Below, a squad of Centurion elite guards, her own people in their shining white armor, were making a stand. They were the pride of the fleet, trained in the graceful arts of energy combat. They fired their energy carbines in perfect unison. The blue bolts splashed harmlessly against the heavy black iron of the Vorg suits, dissipating like water on hot oil. The Vorg didn't even slow down. They walked through the energy fire and cut the Centurions down with brutal kinetic rounds. The beautiful white armor shattered. Blue blood sprayed across the deck. It wasn't a battle, it was an extermination. "My people," Elara whimpered, tears leaking from her violet eyes. "Their shields, they are doing nothing." "Why are they doing nothing?" "Physics," Ronin muttered, his face grim. "You can't dissipate a solid slug with a polarized field. It carries too much mass. Your tech is built for duels, their tech is built for murder. We have to help them." Elara raised her heavy revolver, her hand shaking. "Not yet," Ronin said, pushing the barrel down. He was watching the enemy, counting. Patience. You fire now, you miss, you die, and you save nobody. "They are being exterminated." "They are drawing me out," Ronin corrected. "Look at the formation. Wedge. Overlapping fields of fire. They're waiting for the hero to jump out and be stupid." He pointed to a massive figure striding through the smoke. The leader was a tower of black chrome, a cape made of braided wire and human skulls rattling against his back. He carried a gravity hammer that crackled with purple lightning. "Warlord Crag," Ronin murmured. "He got old too. You know this creature?" "I gave him the scar that runs down his face." Ronin checked the action on his rifle. "Listen to me carefully, Commander. I'm going to flank them. I need you to stay here. You see that yellow fuel manifold running above the entrance?" Elara squinted through the smoke, her advanced vision zooming in. "The hydrazine line?" "Yes, I've overridden the safeties. It's pressurized at 400 psi. Ronin looked her in the eye. "When I give the signal, you shoot the valve release. Not the pipe, the valve, it's the red wheel. Can you hit a 10-centimeter target at 50 meters without a computer?" Elara looked at the heavy revolver in her hand. Her hands were shaking. She had never fired a weapon without a smart link. I do not know. The probability of a miss is—" "Forget probability," Ronin snapped. "Look at the target, squeeze the trigger. You better find out if you can shoot, because if you miss, we burn." Ronin disappeared into the shadows. Elara was left alone in the vent. She looked down at the carnage. Her advanced civilization, her algorithms, her arrogance, none of it mattered here. All that mattered was the heavy piece of steel in her hand and the old human moving in the dark. Below, Ronin emerged from behind a stack of cargo crates. He didn't run, he walked. He walked out into the open floor of the hangar, 40 yards from the warlord. He stood amidst the bodies of the Centurian guards, a solitary figure in dirty gray coveralls holding a rifle made of wood and steel. "Crag!" Ronin's voice boomed, amplified by nothing but lung capacity and rage. "You're tracking mud on my floor." The warlord froze. The massive alien turned slowly, the servos in his armor whining, the red ocular sensors focused on Ronin. A guttural laugh erupted from the external speakers. "The ghost!" Craig roared. "You look... Small time has eaten you, human. You are gray, you are weak. Time eats everything," Ronin said calmly. "But I'm still standing, which is more than I can say for your brother." The insult hit its mark like a hammer. Craig roared, raising the massive gravity hammer. "Kill him, tear the meat from his bones!" The Vorg troopers spun around, 50 railguns leveling at the lone man. "Now, Elara!" Ronin barked into his comms. High above, Elara held her breath. She didn't try to interface with the gun. She didn't look for a targeting reticle. She just felt the weight of it. She aimed with her eye, not her chip. She squeezed the trigger. Boom! The recoil was savage. It felt like her wrist had snapped. But the heavy slug flew true, ping. It struck the valve release mechanism. The wheel spun off. A curtain of liquid hydrazine, clear and pungent, sprayed out under immense pressure, drenching the cluster of Vorg troopers at the entrance. "Ignition," Ronin muttered. He raised his rifle and fired a single incendiary round into the puddle. The world turned white. The hydrazine ignited with a whump that shook the station's foundation. A wall of fire roared into existence, instantly cooking the troopers in the rear guard. The screams were terrible, high mechanical shrieks as the heat fused armor to flesh. Chaos erupted. The formation broke. Ronin didn't flinch from the heat. He advanced. He brought the rifle up. Thump, 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 thump. The heavy kinetic rounds punched through eye slits and neck seals. He wasn't spraying bullets. He was distributing death with the precision of a master craftsman. Craig stumbled back, his shields flaring as the fire washed over him. He charged through the flames, screaming a war cry, swinging the hammer. Ronin dropped the rifle. It was empty. He didn't reload. He drew the shotgun from his back. Craig swung the hammer. A blow meant to pulverize a tank. Ronin didn't try to block. He was 60 years old. His knees were bad. His back was stiff. He couldn't match the alien's strength, but he had treachery. Ronin stepped inside the arc of the swing, moving into the danger zone. He jammed the barrel of the shotgun directly into the exposed servo joint of Craig's armpit. "Sit down," Ronin grunted. He pulled the trigger. The drum magazine emptied in 3 seconds. Full auto. Depleted uranium buckshot shredded the internal mechanisms. The armor disintegrated. The warlord's arm was blown clean off the chassis in a shower of sparks and black fluid. Craig toppled sideways, crashing to the deck with the sound of a collapsing building. Ronin stood over him. He was breathing heavy now, sweat cutting tracks through the soot on his face. He drew the combat knife. Craig looked up, his red eyes flickering. "I have fleet," the alien wheezed. "I have legions. You are one old man in a dying station." "I'm not just an old man," Ronin said, reversing the grip on the knife. "I'm the guy who fixes the problems." He drove the blade down. The silence that followed the fight was heavier than the noise. The remaining Vorg troopers, seeing their warlord dead and their squad burning, broke. They were bullies. Bullies don't fight when the alpha falls. They retreated to their dropships, dragging their wounded, laying down blind fire as they fled. Ronin didn't chase them. He watched them go, his chest heaving, until the ships lifted off and blasted back toward the vacuum. Only then did he sheath the knife. He leaned against a crate, his legs trembling slightly. Adrenaline was a debt and the collection was due. Elara scrambled down the access ladder. She ignored the grease staining her uniform. She ran to him, skidding to a halt. She looked at the carnage. The burning aliens, the melted steel, the dead warlord. She looked at Ronin. Really looked at him. She saw the blood on his knuckles, the gray stubble on his chin, the sheer undeniable reality of him. "You," she started, and her voice failed her. Ronin wiped a smear of black oil from his forehead. "Good shot on the valve, Commander. You handled the recoil better than I thought you would. Maybe there's hope for you yet." "You killed him," Elara whispered, looking at the massive corpse of the warlord. My elite guards and the pride of the Centurian fleet, they could not stop them. Our technology, it failed. But you, with wood and lead, tools are only as good as the hands holding them. Ronin winced as he shifted his weight. His bad knee was screaming, they'll send more. My quiet retirement is over. You cannot stay here, Elara said. The Centurian High Council, they must know of this. You are a warrior of the highest order. They will study your tactics. I'm not a warrior. Ronin picked up his rifle, checking it for damage. I'm a janitor with a history. He began to limp toward the mess hall. He needed to sit down. Ronin, Elara called out. He stopped, looking back over his shoulder. The firelight cast long shadows across his scarred face. Elara holstered the massive revolver. She stood up straight. She didn't offer a Federation salute. Instead, she placed her fist over her heart and bowed her head low. A Centurian gesture reserved for kings and high admirals. A gesture of total submission to a superior power. I apologize, she said, her voice clear and stripped of all arrogance. I called you primitive. I called you obsolete. I was blinded by my own light. You are the apex. Ronin looked at her. For a moment, the hard mask slipped. His eyes crinkled at the corners. You were right about one thing, Commander, he grunted. Peace is boring, but it beats the hell out of the alternative. He turned and walked away into the smoke. 2 days later, the Centurian Grand Fleet arrived. 3 massive dreadnoughts, sleek and white, dropped out of warp. They found the station battered, scorched, but secure. They found the wreckage of a Vorg assault force that should have wiped the outpost off the map. High Admiral Juro stood in the mess hall reading the after-action report. He looked up at Commander Elara. She was no longer wearing the pristine ceremonial uniform. She was wearing a heavy scuffed combat vest over her fatigues. You are telling me, Commander, the Admiral said, his voice echoing in the silent room, that a single human maintenance laborer organized the defense, neutralized a high warlord, and held the facility using archaic projectile weapons? This defies all simulations. Not a laborer, Admiral, Elara said. She looked at the corner table. It was empty. Ronin was down in the sublevels, recalibrating the moisture evaporators. He had refused to meet the Admiral. He said the water pressure was too low. His name is Ronin, Elara said. And I would not disturb him, Admiral. He has not had his coffee yet. The Admiral looked at the empty table, then at the carnage outside. He rubbed his smooth chin. Ronin. That name appears in the ancient archives. We thought the human legends were exaggerations. They were not exaggerations, Admiral, Elara smiled, touching the heavy revolver holstered at her hip, a permanent addition to her uniform. He was just waiting. Down in the dark of the maintenance tunnels, Ronin tightened a bolt on the water cycler. The wrench felt good in his hand. Simple, honest. The galaxy was loud, and it was getting louder. The Vorg would be back, others would come. The young ones, with their shiny skin and fancy lights, would keep making messes, and the old ones would keep cleaning them up. But for now, the hum of the machine was steady. The perimeter was secure. Ronin took a breath of the stale, recycled air. He wasn't bored anymore, he was ready. And God help the next fool who mistook his silence for weakness.